Good evening. We start our program DeFacto Review about three important events of last week happened in Mongolia in our political, economic, and social life. Today in program, first is court becoming impartial. Behind parliament degree on usury is distance education and social inequality. These are the three topics we would like to share with you from politically independent and the civic society point of view. How do we as citizens see the happenings? About the first topic, about court system, whether it is becoming more impartial or not. As you have seen, since June, there were several criminal court cases in Mongolia. I would like to group these cases into two. One is about mega projects. The second is about embezzlement of small medium enterprise fund money by politicians. About mega projects, several high-ranking public officials were sentenced after many years of court case considerations. And it all happened in June, just during election. Ex-Prime Minister Ing Sekhan got 4.5 years imprisonment. The reason is not very clear. Former Prime Minister Bayer got 5 years. Bayer was the key person of OT contract and government with the government, and he was sentenced for 5 years because he was using, according to the court, his positions information for dealing with a private company, Petrovis, for their own interests. They have bought real estate in the US, and this money was regarded using illegally. Former head of Erdenes Oyu Tolgoi, Dagambolt, got 4 years, and we will talk about that later. And also Erdenes Mongol, executive director Sekhan, also 4 years. And there was a head of General Tax Authority. He got for 1.5 years of imprisonment. For these last three persons were the reason they got this punishment was, first, they cut tax revenues of the country by allowing ignoring certain tax commitment, tax debt of OT company. And a second reason was the loss of contribution to the loss of trust of people in state, and also for participation in the violation of public interests. And the fourth was the misusing of power and positions. Actually it is not very clear in these three cases we will talk about later. Second group of punishment or court case was around small medium enterprises. I specify it because it has to do with former parliament members. Ex-parliament member Mr. Sultan got 3 years for using that fund, small medium enterprise support fund. And Mr. and former agriculture minister Batıtsoruk got penalty of 40 million tugriks only because he had pleaded himself guilty and acquitted for acquisition, and also he paid the damage, which was not the case with the former parliament member Mrs. Underma, who got 2.5 years. She is also related. She's a wife of the owner of the Capital Bank, who is also in prison now, in investigation, under arrest with other 3 his colleagues. And the scandal around Capital Bank was closed on in April last year, and they have frozen possible all assets of the bank, 200 around billion tugrik. And out of this misusing small medium enterprise money, Mr. Dambochir, his court case is postponed till 19th of this month. But however, there are several other parliament members accused for misusing their power to take fund money, about 800 million or to 1 billion tugriks they have been receiving through their related companies of their parents or relatives, brothers, sisters. And those parliament members, though many of them are refusing to accept that, they said that it is not related to me, but however, the companies that got money are somehow connected with these people. And those parliament members are Hurilsuh, Temuling, Saranchimik, Battumur, Bolorchulung, and Ochiral. Those parliament members are also using the Small Medium Support Fund, Enterprise Support Fund, but however, they are sitting in the parliament. So what kind of conclusions you can make out of these two groups of cases? First of all, is the court too political? It seems so, because first of all, many of these cases were investigated for years, even for 4 years, etc. But suddenly during the election process, these people were these cases were considered by the court, and as I mentioned, these punishments were given to those people. So the question is why it is done during the election campaign, because many of them were also candidates for. They were campaigning for. They were candidates for parliament members. So that's very surprising. First. Secondly, if it is really not political, then why such cases like Erdinet 49% purchase from Russia with public money involving TDB bank owner Erden Bilik? Why, for example, why Oyung Erden, who was the key person against this embezzlement of public money, has a silence now, and why nobody is talking about this 49% of Erdinet cases? That gives me saying that court system is becoming political. Second, was court process was just or impartial? In case of Mr. Inksaikhan, Biambasaikhan, and Ta Kambold, the reasons of their punishment are not very clear for public. So people are questioning these sentences. Why? Because they have been implementing either parliament decision or government cabinet decisions. So if high-ranking public officers will not do their jobs as it was instructed or ordered by the higher-ranking positions authority, then who will do public high-ranking position? Who will do this kind of decisions, critical decisions for large projects for the economy? That's the questions are remaining in public today. The third observation is corruption has become so rampant in all walls of Mongolian governance, be it legislation or execution or court system, justice system. All those positions, the people who have been punished, as I described it just now, are representing those branches of power. In particular, I want to tell that our parliament is becoming kind of a shelter. Those who are inside the shelter are not punished. Those who, as soon as they leave the shelter, they are punished. So according to this logic, we expect many other current parliament members to be also punished later on when they leave. So it raises a question of parliament members' immune system, so that they are not touchable, they are not arrested, so they are defended by law. So whether, I mean, in many countries there is no such a system where parliament members are protected completely from all whatever they do while they are in the parliament. So that's something that Mongolia needs to consider still. So that's on about first topic. About second topic, let me brief you about the banking system in the country. As we speak of, we have 12 commercial banks in Mongolia and 17 trillion tugrik loan portfolio, and average weighted annual interest rate is 16.3%. We have 14.5 trillion tugrik saving in the banking system, and saving weighted average rate is 10.7%, which is way higher than any other countries, almost. However, true interest rates in some cases are becoming more than 20+% in banking system, 30+% per year in non-bank financial institutions, and pawns, we call it Lombards, there will be 30+ interest rates. And there is also a day loan existing in markets. If annualized, it will be more than 80% per year. So altogether it makes complete usury, how we call it. So for last 20 years, Mongolians were expecting that commercial banks will be, with the free competition, will be able to decrease the commercial rates. They do decreasing, but not to the level that any normal business can survive with the current interest rates. So what happened was, People's Party during last election had promised to cut the loan interest rate, and they said to 1 digit, or 1% per month, or 12% a year. Current weighted average rate, from current weighted average rate of 16.3%. So how is it realistic? So let's talk about what kind of problems we have in Mongolian banking sectors. First of all, these 12 commercial banks, each of them owned by either one or three individuals, the most. Almost all of them, but except few banks like Hasbank. And yet the owners of commercial banks are not completely transparent. Second, bank owners run many businesses, and they finance them with relatively cheaper sources of money. That completely cutting the free competition and seizing the opportunities for other businesses. The third is few large saving owners are truly making usury. Because can you imagine 14% per a large amount of money? I am for market regulations. I prefer market regulation than the other regulations. But however, those billionaires mostly are becoming from public governance. They are former high-ranking officials, public officials. So that's why there is no free competition. The third, state government agencies, many people, they save money also with these high interest rates, and they are being a part of this usury. Another point is public governance is really not good in this country. That's why we have billionaires from the government. and mostly people do, or they are working or making money on public tender. And after all, there are some criminal cases. Somebody's punished for misusing public funds, but never compensated. So they just got some prison sentences. But people are now, first of all, demanding they are to pay the damage. And lastly, central bank is not doing very well its main function, controlling commercial banks. That's why several banks are becoming bankrupt, and we know that only after, and many people lost their property, their money inside commercial banks. So that's the situation with commercial banks in Mongolia. So we have made estimation how does the bank loan interest rate is composed. It is consisting of 65% of the total cost. It's consisting of the source of money, which is saving, 10%, 10.7. Operation expenses of commercial banks, 2.4%. Risk fund, 1.63, and the required reserve, 0.76, and commercial banks profit is around 0.76. And altogether it makes 16.5%, which I mentioned above. So that's why they are making a law against the usury. That will be approved next week, when August 17th, the parliament will rejoin for their sessions. And they're going to make this decree of limiting interest rate. But however, there is not much talk about that interest rate is to do with not only a bank, but also other entities, non-bank financial institutions, bonds, and other daily loan givers somehow. Why? Because if you do not limit the ceiling of the bank, the ceiling of the loan interest rates in the country, then all these institutions will be moved to the institutions that are not inside of the law. So what will happen in midterm? In midterm, if they limit the interest rate of a loan, of any loan in the country, and in case of banks, there will be less available loan. That's what happened in every country who tried this. But commercial banks will increase their different fees or prepayments so that the actual interest rate is becoming higher. But however, it also pushes commercial banks to merger and acquisition, to have a less cost. So we expected more merger and acquisition. What happened for example, in South Korea. Also, commercial banks will try to decrease their costs, maybe extending more digital services, maybe closing unprofitable branches. So anyway, the banking service is becoming, within particular fintech, has become very competitive. But what happens for longer term? Longer term, those countries who have introduced usury laws or limits, they find that it limits free competition of commercial banks, which is true. So Mongolia, after a certain time, hopefully after creating a certain free competition conditions, after, for example, the state is not a part of usury, they may have release or they terminate those limiting interest rate laws, then we will have substantial changes in the commercial bank. Basically, the parliament is doing this regulation by the state for prices because commercial banks are not creating free competition under the circumstances I have just described. And hopefully from next year it will be easier for businesses to run businesses with a cheaper source of money. That's the hope. Third topic we would like to talk today is distance education and social inequality. Distance education, or we nowadays use term called online education. We talk about that because recently, as we speak of last week, there was a new government decisions that the school years, academic year, we call it also, start September 1st. But the people will have a choice. Can go to cabinet or they can do it online. But the quality of education issue is coming now. I mean, luckily we don't have a death or an infection inside of the country, and about 300 cases of coronavirus infections are imported. So this country is trying its best to have not dissemination of this disease inside of the country. So after almost 8 months quarantine of schools, some schools were online, but we don't know how much it really actually it is covered, how many % of students covered under this education system. So the new resolution makes or puts new challenges for education system in the country. Why? Because we have in Mongolia over 800 secondary schools. We will talk about secondary schools now, meaning from 1 to the 12th grades. And 80% of them are state-owned, 20% are private. 70% of schools are in countryside, 30% in the capital. But however, capital has half of the population, so you can imagine what is the concentration of students in capital city Ulaanbaatar. We have some 600,000 peoples in secondary schools. Out of peoples, 93% learn or go to state schools, public schools, 7% to private schools. So you can compare. Total 30,000 teachers we have. And if we do the education online, it means first of all, each teacher must have a computer, laptop mostly. And the same with the students, because even 2 students are in the same family, but schools are different. So basically, not to have normal distance education or online education, we must have provided, or they must have computer, laptops. So it's a large challenge. In Mongolia, above 6 years old people, total, they use, according to these operators, 72% of them use internet, but by phone. Not if for education they need to have a normal PC or laptops, which allows them to have watch PowerPoint slides, etc. So can we provide all these laptops? That's an issue. And recently, new education minister had made a resolution to give 30 to 100 laptops to teachers. And we don't know how many of these 30,000 teachers have on laptops. But it's still 3,200 for this year. Teachers will have on laptop now. But we can imagine how many laptops we need to normal, equal, high quality education processes in Mongolia from September 1st this year. We need to talk about also private and public schools quality because it makes substantial differences. It creates already huge social inequality in Mongolia. Why? Because those who goes to private schools, they have a tuition fee. The parents, they can afford, but those who cannot afford, still they try to give people, their children to private schools because it's a much high quality, no doubt. The tuition fee in this country is from 1 million to 60 million tugrov. It's about what, almost $20,000, the maximum, highest private schools tuition rate per year. And yet, Mongolian government provides money from their budget, SCA budget, which is not enough for whole family, for whole country. Still they provide so-called current expenses to private schools. The cabinet made recently a decision. It was from May this year, 27th of this year, because of the coronavirus. They will provide 50 billion tugriks of current cost per people. The current cost is the cost per people. 50 billion tugriks will be provided to private schools and kindergartens. Well, on one hand, it's understandable. It's the same Mongolian children. Everybody should be treated equal on one side. But on the other side, that treatment makes more inequality in our education system. So it is by law that private schools will receive money as much as the public schools. And yet the private schools are becoming a big business in the country. Okay, business is good, but however, they provides, as I told, big social inequality. Social equality is big anyway. In Mongolia, 1/3 of population is living under poverty line. That means 1/3 of the children are not eating enough. And we provide school lunch for every child. Because coronavirus, it means schools don't work, schools are closed, so those children from poor or poorer families don't eat enough during this time. So it says how much inequality we have already. And yet, we are creating it on the purpose now. Even the government itself is creating a difference, or kind of discrimination. For example, the Ministry of Education had created several schools called lab schools, or it's also called Cambridge program schools, where the students are selected. Also, teachers are paid 30% higher than other ordinary schools. So now we are questioning, what is the purpose of the education? It is proposed to create stars, or to make a less social inequality? That's what Mongolian society is now questioning and needs answer, clear answer, not easy. So the questioning is now, shall we provide or not that current costs to private schools? Also, shall we require these private schools accept children from its vicinity or not? So these are the questions I think the society needs to answer, and many people are questioning today. So these are three main points, topics of our this week DeFacto review. Thank you very much for staying with us. And we are also on our program, Facebook, Jargal DeFacto Live. Thank you. See you next week. One is the Fund of Future.